Hi, thanks for taking time to visit and listen to our vlog about the latest trends and reporting requirements for all CEOs, CFOs, and support team members who are adopting practices for the environmental, social responsibility, and governance standards in your organizations. I'm Donna Hamlin. I'm here with Mark Lupe. We're partners at CFOs to Go, and we work with clients both at the board and the management level on this topic, with diverse companies ranging from public and private, nonprofit, and emerging social impact companies. Based on our work, we thought we'd address with you today 4 key topics that would be helpful: investor trends towards ESG-based expectations, the role that ESG plays with public and non-public entities, reporting standards and requirements, and the roles and responsibilities of you to address.
Donna and everyone, I'm sure if you are listening to this view today, you have a foundation in sustainability. But many people don't always understand the foundation. The foundation started with the United Nations many, many years ago and developed a framework called the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's 17 of them. I won't go through all 17, of course, but the fundamental belief is that as we protect the planet overall, and businesses have responsibility. Protecting, as you can see on the slide here, number 1, from no poverty in the world, to the last one, number 17, was partnerships for the goals that pertain to the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are certain frameworks, and you see at the heading, there's the GRI standard, which is the Global Reporting Initiative. There is the Developing Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. Those of you with a financial background understand the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and it is very, very similar. There's ISO 26000. Again, repeating here is the SDGs, also known as the Sustainable Development Goals, B Corp, which we'll talk about later. And then there is the Dow Jones Sustainable Index, which is an index representing 2,500 of the largest companies in the world, and they get tracked based upon a sustainable assessment analysis. But Donna will give you a further background on what this means.
Yeah, the influence that's happening today is a trend that we're watching and we're monitoring, especially when it comes to looking at boards' responsibilities for this. The United Nations pulled all of the key institutional investors together and created a set of principles for responsible investment. And the top institutional investors that represent $10 trillion, 200 of these organizations have all signed a commitment to key principles. Look at this list of things that they are committed to as part of their due diligence before they make an investment. Now, whether all of those 200 are doing it at the same level of rigor, we don't know, because each client that we talk to, we're learning different things. But this is quite a robust commitment. So those of you that are looking for institutional capital really do have to have some defensibility to meet the standard required for that capitalization.
And I think it's important as we talk about the philosophy, which Donna referenced just recently, to how do you get to execution? And as we all know, execution requires some definitive guideline in an organization in terms of defining roles, what the reporting standards are, which reporting standards the organization wants to follow, and who has responsibility for implementing those standards within an organization. Well, we'll talk soon, but it's important to understand that all standards are not created equally, because companies are not all the same. A telecommunications company is different than an agribusiness organization, is different than a tobacco company. So you can see here we have the implementation can differ by industry. There are guidelines that are industry oriented, but they all have one common dimension, and that is the responsibility at the board level and at the C-suite or executive level in an organization. All have responsibility, as Donna said. Even though companies sign at the UN level, each company has the same type of responsibility as they sign their corporate responsibility reports on a yearly basis. Now we'll talk about certain trends and practices that we see in an organization. Now there are 4 major standards, and you probably say, well, if there's 4 standards out there, how can there be 4 implementation? Which is very true, because this is a very much of an evolving area. But certain standards are, we would say, more equal than others. What we've done here is provide a framework to simplify the focus. And you can see we have 4 dimensions across 4 types of industry standards. So an entity can be from a B Corp, and those of you may not know, a B Corp is generally a non-public company, can be a company that is public, but generally not, and is usually a mutual benefit organization that really has a responsibility to provide a responsible business to its, shall we say, stakeholders, not necessarily what you see in a C Corp, which is basically very profit-oriented. But you see the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is really a corporate sustainability assessment for public companies. You see the Global Reporting Initiative that we talked about before, which is very much modeled what Donna shared with you about the UN model, which is really the foundation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And then lastly, there is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is evolving over a period of time, but follows, as I said before, very much like the FASB. So let's take each role as a reference. The entity type, I talked about the B Corp, but the last 3 really pertain to publicly held companies. For example, Salesforce does a very good job in adhering to the Global Reporting Initiative and also somewhat to the SASB model. They all have one common dimension too, is they're all metric oriented. And we'll talk later about a company that reports its metrics versus those that have validation of those metrics. Then there's the life cycle relevancy. And what that means that an organization talks about when from concept of a business, it could be a product, it can be a service, but at the end of the day, what happens at the end when there's time for disposal or end of that activity. It could be a product to the point of, and many of us heard here in the news today about plastic straws. Plastic straws start at a certain process, but at the end of the day, they end up in the environment, which is not a very nice thing, as we all know. And then there is industry orientation. All of them except one have an industry orientation. As I said before, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index is modeled after 2,500 largest companies, then all the others are very public oriented, but all industry oriented too, except the B Corp. And it doesn't mean they're all one and the same. There is an option to be flexible. And as I said, I talked about the B Corp. Again, there is the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the Global Reporting Initiative, and the SASB, if you will. Now, what happens with implementation? And there can be several questions that come up. We just picked the top 4. Many people say, well, does a service company differ than a product company? The answer is no. Many service companies, probably a little bit more of a laggard than product companies, but they still have responsibility, as we at CFOs to go believe in sustainability very much.
To add to that, Mark, we noticed that the B Corps are a little different than the public companies, but those of you who are getting access to capital from non-institutionalized investors, just more of an early stage, are also being asked these questions, especially if there are family funds, for example, that are interested in looking at social impact companies. And they're following these guidelines as well. So nobody's really immune to this.
That's right, right. It's a very good point, Donna. And then people ask, well, how do I get started? Well, first it requires a commitment at the board level and at the C-suite level. And I say this in earnest because you'll find, and we find, there could be a tremendous advocate in a company, but if that individual or organization does not have the support, especially as it gets to the reporting requirements, it can fail. So it really requires a true commitment. And then once the commitment is there, there's a requirement, I should say, that there is a model in terms of what the life cycle of an organization is. It's a very long effort. A company should take a piece at a time. It's a multi-year investment, a multi-year commitment. So get started slowly, get some traction in an organization that's really committed, and then use those wins to have other people in the organization sign on to the effort. The question is, what is the level of effort in reporting? Well, as always, it depends. It depends because if you're a large organization, it could be a multi-divisional, international organization, different standards. But the point is, if you take it one step at a time, because I would say that most of the standards believe and know it's a multi-year effort. So just showing progress and a commitment in your reporting to the board, to the public, that is a very good step, knowing that there is measurable progress on a year-by-year basis. Then some people say, well, what are the disadvantages of not adhering to a standard of reporting? Well, the disadvantage is, and I've seen this, and people say in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index model, that is all self-reporting. And the disadvantage of not adhering to a standard can provide a perspective that there's not objectivity. But at the end of the day, when there is multi-year reporting, a trend gets established, and then credibility, I would say, is earned.
Which is part of what the board has to look at by trust and verify.
That's right. That's right. So I hope this has been very helpful to you all.
We know that you may be just starting and need a little bit of guidance on that, or you may be already in the throes of it, but it's not very efficient or effective. And we're here to help in any way. As you might have questions, just give us a call.
Take care and have a great day.
Thank you.